This podcast does not provide medical advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hi, and welcome to the podcast, Everyone Dies. I'm Marianne Matzo.
And I'm not. Oh, but I am Charlie Navarrete.
So grab your beverage of choice, your dessert. Hope you have your comfy pajamas on. And we're glad that you're going to spend the next hour with us, or at least we hope you'll hang in there. Today we're going to talk about traumatic bereavement, which the last podcast we talked about sort of uncomplicated or untraumatic, non-traumatic bereavement. And today we're going to talk about traumatic bereavement because that's a lot of what's going on with the COVID virus. And then later in our third half, Charlie's going to be talking about people who died during sex. So that'll be fun.
I look forward to hearing about that.
Charlie,
yes?
What's on the menu today?
Well, actually, when I went to my local grocery store, I mentioned last time that I was going to look at chocolates, I think they say Switzerland, Belgium, from Belgium. What I found were a few cakes, and there was one chocolate cake that looked homemade. So I decided to give it a try. And I don't know if it was homemade, but it was pretty good. It chocolate layer. The frosting did taste homemade. It didn't taste plasticky or store-bought. The cake itself, 2 layers, not exactly moist, not dry, but not exactly moist. But, for just a quick little, bite of chocolate, it was okay. What about you? What do you got?
Well, I thought I would bake the Death by Chocolate eclair cake.
Oh,
and we
yes,
have that recipe.
I see this here on the screen. Yes.
We have that recipe on the web, everyonedies.org. It's EVERY, the number 1, dies.org. So, Charlie, can you describe this cake for us?
Yes, I see this description. So, if you love classic eclair cake, you'll do backflips for this glorious Death by Chocolate eclair cake. The chocolate mousse-like filling is sandwiched between chocolate graham crackers, then topped with the chocolate ganache. Ganache? Ganache. How's that for spoiling the for spoiling the atmosphere?
Wow.
The top is beautifully garnished with chocolate whipped cream, making it a chocolate lover's dream come true.
I might need a moment, Charles.
Yeah, I might need a moment too. I think I just sprained my throat. Okay.
So everybody check out that on our webpage. So today, Charlie, in our second half, we're going to talk about traumatic bereavement. And we have resources on our webpage. We have handouts, lots of resources if you want to know more about any of our topics. We add those for you. So traumatic bereavement is, and I'm going to give you, this academic version, so hang with me for a moment.
Okay.
Is a state of having suffered the loss of a loved one when grief and mourning over the death is complicated or overpowered by the traumatic stress brought on by its circumstances. That's from Rando. Now, another one from Barley is a death is considered traumatic if it occurs without warning. It's untimely if it involves violence, if there is damage to the loved one's body, if it was caused by a perpetrator with the intent to harm, if the survivor regards the death as preventable, if the survivor believes that the loved one suffered, or if the survivor regards the death or manner of the death as unfair and unjust. So I think I like the Bari definition better. But it's the whole idea that, it's one thing if you're taking care of somebody who's in hospice and you have that warning shot, like we talked about when we talked about, getting bad news. You have that warning shot that says, this person's really, really sick, and I know that they're not long for this world. It's another thing to take your loved one to the hospital because they're having trouble breathing from this COVID virus and leave them at the door because they won't let you go upstairs with them. Hear that they've been intubated and on a respirator and not be able to be there with them, and then hear that they died. And that's just trauma all the way around, because you don't have that idea that, oh my God, I need to tell them I love them, or I need to say I'm sorry for whatever, we happen to have done, or to say goodbye. All of those things are really important at the end of life, and you're denied those when there's been a traumatic event. So it could be like the virus, it could be a school shooting where you send your child off to school.
Oh, geez.
And,
right. Yeah.
You don't know that this is the day that they're not coming home. Or we had a situation 2 months ago, excuse me, in Oklahoma City, where at a high school, well, actually it was in Moore, a high school, the bunch of kids from the track team, a lot of them were seniors, were crossing a street and they were hit. And there have been 3 deaths out of, I think, 3 out of that, and a bunch of other kids injured. Seniors in high school, Charlie, who, you as a parent, we're not expecting to get that news. Yeah. And when you get that news of that sudden and traumatic death, it really derails you. Any death is going to derail you in some way. But these sudden traumatic deaths are especially worse. And that traumatic death disables our ability to cope. It impairs our functioning. It's like you can't even think straight. You can't even get your head around the idea this is what happened, and now they're dead. It really complicates the mourning process and increases the mourner's distress. So, traumatic bereavement, you're at a high risk for traumatic bereavement if it's a sudden death. It's a death that comes abruptly and shockingly and without any warning and without any expectation. My best friend for many, many years, Kathy, had called me one day, and I was at the hospital and I didn't answer the phone. And when I got in my car, I called back. And she answered. I said, "Hey, girl," and she's the girl who answered was her daughter, and she said, "No, it's told me who it was." And I said, "Oh, hey, honey," and she said, "Mom's dead." I said, "Don't goof with me that way. That's just not nice, girl." And she's like, "No, Mom's dead." And Kathy was younger than I. She was out gardening, came in the house, apparently, I don't know, to get a glass of water, I don't know for what, and died. And it was traumatic for all of us. It's like, how does this vital, funny, wonderful woman just drop dead? And so that sudden and traumatic experience really causes difficulty with the bereavement process. Now, in the case of Kathy, last time anybody saw her, she was looking great. And so when her daughter, they were going to cremate her and take her back to Connecticut for burial. And her daughter said, "Yeah, we'll just sign the papers and we'll get her cremated." I said, "You know what, honey, we really need to go see her." And she said, "No, I do not want to see her." And I said, "I understand that. I appreciate that. I don't blame you, but you need to see her. You need to see that she is really dead." And I said, or else, you're going to go through life wondering, did she just run away? Did she go someplace else? What happened? You need to see. And so we went, and they, had laid just, in a room, laid her out so that her daughter could see her. And we're standing there, and she said, I'm glad we did this. She said, I was wondering if maybe she killed herself, but look at her roots. She never would have killed herself with roots. And we both started laughing hysterically because it was absolutely the truth. If she was going to kill herself, she would have dyed her roots first. So we knew, that this wasn't planned by anybody. And it was so good for her daughter to see her mom before she was cremated, to see that she was really dead. And so, was that traumatic? Yes. Was it important to do? Yes. And so that again leads into that traumatic bereavement. Traumatic deaths can be the cause of, natural forces. Somebody who has a heart attack or a stroke or, blood clot or a seizure. All of those things, those are natural things within their body. They can happen very quickly. That New York saying, they were dead before they hit the floor.
Right.
That's that's the thing, is that bam, it happened, and nobody saw that one coming. And then there's these unnatural deaths where the person doesn't die of natural causes, but there's an external agent, something has come in, like an accident or a disaster, a suicide, a homicide, terrorism or war. Those things that, what the heck? How did that happen? And for all the deaths that we're having in the country and all over the world related to this virus, it's the same kind of thing. It is a disaster. And when you have a disaster, it's going to result in these, traumatic bereavement.
It's I just had a thought. Of course, I'm in New York City, and I was here on 9/11, and so many people said just that. My spouse, my son, my friend, went to work as usual, 8:30, 9 o'clock. And, an hour later, he was gone.
Right.
That was so sudden. It just happened first thing in the morning. But with this here in New York with the coronavirus, someone literally on a Friday, someone who lived north of New York City in Westchester County, and takes the train into Grand Central Station every day. This gentleman's a lawyer and works near Grand Central Station. But the thing of it is, he takes the train into Grand Central Station every day. There are, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say hundreds of thousands of commuters go into Grand Central every day. Well, because it was Grand Central and so many people are there, from that Friday to Monday morning, suddenly New York City changed, because it was in such a huge venue like Grand Central Station. It was, and again, no one had died, but it seemed to put a pall over everything. Now it really hit home. And it seemed, for some people, I was listening to the radio, that people, and I just, when you said this, I just thought of that. Some people I remember the same sort of reactions when, people suddenly died that morning on 9/11. It's just, everything changed. And
Right.
No one had died at that point from coronavirus, but it was that. You just, walk out the door and everything changes.
And imagine, not only does it change, but if somebody dies, it'll never go back
Right.
to what it was.
Yeah.
So having a traumatic loss really creates challenges. For example, your capacity to cope is overwhelmed. It's like, you can cope with a lot of things, right? This happens, this happens, this happens. But sometimes you get to that point where, all right, this is just too damn much. I have coped all I can, and this is not something I feel I can cope with. It's not to say that you can't and you won't, but the feeling is that you are totally overwhelmed. How you view the world and how you think about the world has been really violently shattered. We think about we're a humane country. We think that we'll protect nurses and doctors who are going to go, take care of people with the virus. We think that no matter where our loved one is, we'll be able to say goodbye to them. And all of these things that we thought were true are not true in this overwhelming disaster with this virus. The loss doesn't make sense to you. I'm so sorry. I don't know why I'm coughing. Maybe it's the flu. No, don't even say that. Shame on you.
Yeah, really. Jeez.
So you feel a loss of security and confidence in the world and how you see and view your life. There's an emotional shock.
It would boost ratings if you never... Well, never mind. Sorry. My mind went elsewhere. So I'm sorry. What were you saying?
Shame on you. I was saying that you experience emotional shock, that Charlie would say a thing like that. And that shock can last for a long period of time. It can be very numbing. I don't even know how to put one foot in front of the other anymore. It can be that devastating. People can get dissociated. They don't kind of stay in their own head. They're people say, oh, they went off to La La Land. It's like this reality is too much. Mm-hmm. And so they kind of pull away. You feel like your mind doesn't work properly. You have trouble concentrating. And as you learn the reality of your loved one's loss, going through other mourning processes take longer after a sudden death. So, we talk about mourning lasts forever. Well, the traumatic aspects of that mourning will last longer with a traumatic death. It's more traumatic, I guess. Thus the term traumatic mourning.
Traumatic death. Traumatic mourning, yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It's all traumatic. You might find that you're pretty irritable, easy to anger. You could develop family relationship problems, work problems, because you're not coping well. You're not being able to mourn because you're just so mad that whatever it is that happened. And you might search for, what is the meaning of this? Why did this happen? And sometimes things just happen. And, I worked in oncology for quite a while before I retired, and I would have so many people with cancer say, but why did I get cancer? And I heard a lecture once where they talked about this guy, I forget where he was, from Harvard or somewhere, was talking about, he had all these different words up, kismet, luck, the butterfly effect, all kinds of random things that occur. Mm-hmm. And they result in something like a cancer. I would say, when your cells were replicating, they zigged instead of zagged. Why? Well, geez, nobody knows. I mean, it could be anything. It could be just a random hiccup in the replication process, but it resulted in cancer. So you can't find meaning or the why. You can find meaning, but you can't find the why. Why exactly did this happen? There sometimes just are no answers. And in this complicated mourning, in these traumatic deaths, there's a higher probability of mental and behavioral and social and physical problems. You'll see marriages fall apart, people staying away from friends, just totally isolating. And that is like a snowball. Then you have even more trouble coping because you have other losses within your life. So people will think about, well, there's this normal grief and normal mourning, and you're not acting that way at all. So what's wrong with you? Are you sick? What's going on? And it's like, as the public, we need to be educated that traumatic mourning is a whole different animal than the uncomplicated kind of mourning. An anticipatory, a death that you can anticipate is very different from these traumatic deaths that happen, as the reasons that we said, in a violent kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
So when that happens, what are the challenges then that are presented? You don't have time to finish the unfinished business that you have with your loved one. We've talked about there's kind of 5 things that you need to do, at the end of life, to say, I love you, I'll miss you, forgive me, I forgive you, and goodbye. But in a traumatic death, you don't have the opportunity to do any of that. And that leaves a huge hole for people. And once the person's died, you can't go back and do it,
right?
Which is part of that trauma. Not being able to be with your loved one at the time of death for whatever reason. Now, there's a lot of, I can't tell you how many times where people are holding a death vigil waiting for mom or dad or to die. And they'll say, you know what, I'm just going to run down the cafeteria really quick and get a cup of coffee. I'll be right back. And in that time,
right,
mom or dad has died.
Yeah.
And family members get so upset because they wanted to be there at that hour of their last breath. And I'll say, sometimes people just want to do that alone. Sometimes, especially if it's a parent, they don't want you to see that. Now, how do they know that you just were going to go take a shower or go get a cup of coffee? Nobody knows. But it happens so frequently that it can't just be an accident. So it's not always possible to be with a person at the time of death, even though that might be something you want. That sudden death really severs your relationship with a loved one, and you can have an intense longing for that physical contact with that person. And it can actually feel like a physical ache that you miss them and just want their touch and their closeness, but you just can't have it. Some people will react by trying to reconstruct exactly what happened. What are the events that led up to their death? And I've talked with people who will give you an exact timeline. There was this, and then there was this, and then they call the doctor, and then this happened. And they need to be able to tell that story, to tell those details. Here's what happened.
Is there but why? Is just one way someone might need to grieve?
It's part of that process in that telling the story makes it real. I see women do the same thing when they give birth, is that they'll say, well, I was at 2 centimeters, and they go through the whole story. Not that, well, birth is traumatic. Let's just be honest about that.
Sure.
But at the end of it, you have this new person in your life. Death can be traumatic, and at the end of it, that person's gone. And so in both of those scenarios, people really feel a strong need to say, let me tell you the story. Let me tell you what happened. And a lot of times, like with the birth, people will often, want to hear that story. But with the death, people feel very uncomfortable. And I hope that people listening to this podcast, begin to appreciate how important it is for people to be able to talk about, here's what happened. Sometimes people feel like, well, so who's responsible? I want to know who's responsible. I want to speak to the manager. Somebody has to be responsible for what happened here. And sometimes that's the case. Mistakes happen in in hospitals. Prisoners aren't guarded and may commit suicide. There's lots of scenarios where, hey, here's the reason this happened. And I've lost something in that sense of, and you need to be punished too. And figuring out how does that work within our system. You hear people, vigilantes, who take those kinds of decisions into their own hands. And then all that does is create more victims, more trauma. So sudden death keeps you from being able to plan, to be able to say, well, before you die, let's go do this, to make a scrapbook or do any kind of preparation for that end of life.
Right, like a closure. Yeah.
Right. You don't get that. After a sudden death, you suffer from not having had the opportunities that are available before an anticipated death to plan and rehearse and begin to think about what's it going to be like to be without this person that I love. You don't get any of those opportunities when it's a sudden death. And so if our listeners have gone through the sudden death, hopefully you have a clergy person or a therapist or a good friend that you can talk with about it. Be gentle with yourself. It's a much harder row to hoe to try to get through a traumatic death. Know that you'll always grieve for them and be patient with yourself. Do you want to add anything, Charlie?
No, but I just caught me when you just said, at the end, just, be gentle with yourself. Yeah, I mean, there's just some things you can't control in like a traumatic death like this. It's, you can't beat yourself up. You can, you can think about it, and of course you'll react to it at first. But as we discussed last time, you might never get over it, but you need to move on. I mean, and eventually you move on, but it'll stay with you. Yeah. Yeah,
you'll always hold.
Yes.
You'll always hold that hole, but it'll be less painful as time goes on.
Right. Exactly.
So in our third half of the show, we have an ongoing segment called In Flagrante Delicto Morte.
Oh, really?
Which is
who? Okay, yeah.
Which is the Latin phrase defined as being caught in a crime or a sexual act and dying while doing it. In other words, people who've died during sex. So Charlie Delicto, if he's here, is going to report.
Oh, that's me. Yes, the last time we spoke about this, we mentioned the French, the President Felix X, who was born in 1841 until he dropped dead in 1899 while being fellatioed by his mistress. Now, the British.
So for people who don't know the French of fellatio,
yes, Mary.
would you like to explain?
Yes, Mary. Why don't you explain it to us?
Well, no, Charlie Delicto has to explain it.
Oh, let's see. So the common phrase, I guess, would be going down on someone. Yes, going down on someone, and I'm trying to think of clever metaphors, but of course none come to mind. But basically, going down on someone.
Oh, like in Grumpy Old Men when Burgess Meredith was.
Right, yeah.
Isn't that hysterical?
Yes.
You should put that clip into the next time Charlie Delicto does a report.
Yes, I do. I shall. I will. can figure out how to do that. Yes.
Anyway, you were saying.
So yes, so a sex act. Oh yes, so sorry. Anyway, yeah. So this was in at the end of the century, 1899. Well, the British then, not to be outdone by their longtime rival, had Lord Palmerston, who was the Prime Minister of England twice, not once, but twice, in the 1800s, also in the 1800s. Old Pam, as he was called, probably never to his face though, officially died of pneumonia after catching cold. After catching a cold. Professor, is it catching cold or catching a cold?
I think you catch a cold.
Okay, fine. Let's go with that. After catching a cold. But it was rumored he actually died of a heart attack while on a pool table. But, of course, since it's England, it was a billiard table.
Was he on the top or on the bottom?
I'd imagine he was on the top because he was there with a maid. So, yeah, I'm going to say on top of the pool table. So I'm going to say in the billiard room, on the pool table with a maid under. There we are.
With a candlestick?
More like a pool cue, or rather a billiard stick. Though I'm not familiar with the gentleman's anatomy, so it could have been one of those little play pool sticks. Who knows?
A cigar?
Perhaps a Churchill, or some old stogie. We will just never know. It's lost to history. Yes. So this, giving a new meaning to the phrase, "Watch me sink this one."
Oh.
Thank you very much. I'll be here all week. Remember to tip your waitstaff generously. All the restaurants are closed right now, so we remember to tip your delivery people generously. So what? But wait, there's more.
There's more.
Yes. So the French retaliated, in a manner of speaking, and about 100 years later, with Cardinal Jean Danielou. You can look it up. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that properly, or you can just call him Jean. But Jean Danielou, well, actually, Marianne, do you know the French phrase for orgasm?
La petite death, la petite mort.
You know what, Marianne? This is like my moment here to shine, and of course you had the answer. But yes, thank you very much. But yes, that's it.
I'm a certified sexual health counselor, so I'm supposed to know that.
Yes. So yes, that is it exactly. Le petit mort, which is the little death. Mm-hmm. So in 1974, the Cardinal had a big death. I actually can't imagine death to be small.
1974?
Yes, 1974.
And he was a cardinal?
Seriously? Yeah.
Catholic?
What?
Catholic?
But wait, there's more. Yes. So he was Catholic cardinal. Not only that, but a Catholic theologian. And the author of many books on sexual morality and church discipline. Well, he had a grand mort in a brothel in Paris. Now, let's hear the full story. But now, come on, let's not pass judgment. His death was explained that he was there to comfort a 24-year-old blonde. officially, in an official capacity. He wanted to, I don't know, officially stamp her or stamp her in an official capacity, but it was something official. And that's
Well, I'm just glad it was an adult woman and not what the other things that priests have been accused of in the past 20 years.
Well, publicly accused of, but I've certainly been accused of it going way back when. But yes, so he was there like in an official capacity to give his official seal of approval.
Wow.
There we are. So,
Is he you should look up and see if there's other clergy people who've died in flagrante delicto morto.
All right, let me make a note here. Official.
I mean, do you think that they would actually admit that?
Clergy. Well, but clergy in an official capacity. I mean, that would be a very, I don't know, select group, I suppose, official capacity.
But if
Yes.
if it's a clergy
Right.
that has taken a vow of celibacy, then
Mon Dieu,
they don't have
mon
to be in
Dieu.
official capacity. They're just never supposed to do that, right?
Wasn't there? No, it wasn't Monty Python, but it was Michael Palin, and I believe Maggie Smith. Okay, I'm going to look this up for next time. But basically, in the movie, I believe Maggie Smith was in charge of a home for wayward girls who just had gotten used to having sex and missed having sex. So to help them not go out and commit cardinal sin, Father Michael Palin took care of them at the at their home.
I wonder if cardinal sin got its name from that cardinal that.
Ooh, more
in
research.
France.
There we are. Cardinal sin. I love research, but yes, obviously it was a British satire is only the British can do. Cardinal sin.
Oh
boy, what a nomiker. What is it? Nomiker, whatever. What a great name.
Look it up.
Yeah, Cardinal Sin. Hi, I'd like to introduce Cardinal Sin. So we have here, well, that's cardinal knowledge, but cardinal knowledge, Cardinal Smith, Cardinal Jones, and Cardinal Sin.
I think it's getting late, Charlie.
Yes,
Hey,
it
if
is.
people want to send their stories, where should they send them?
I don't know. Good question. Where should they? Oh, that's me. Yes. Well, they should send them. Well, they can send them to our website, to our email. That's info@everyonedies.org. That's info@dies.org. Or if you prefer traditional mail, send it to P.O. Box 851-891, Yukon Air. Oh, shoot. Sorry. Not Arizona. Wait, there's a Yukon, Alaska, right? Or the Yukon is in Alaska?
Look it up, Charlie. I don't know.
Oh gosh, all this research now is really going to. Okay, let's go back, please. Our mail address is P.O. Box 851-891, Yukon, Oklahoma 73085.
The home of Garth Brooks.
Really? I did not know that.
Well, that's what the sign says when you enter Yukon.
Okay.
The home of Garth Brooks.
Aren't there also Yukon potatoes?
Yes, there are.
Okay.
You want to hear a joke that one of my patients used to tell me every
No, we're out of time.
freaking
I'm sorry.
He came to see
No,
me.
go ahead. Yeah.
I'm telling you,
Okay.
every time he came to see me,
Yeah.
he would say, if you have two potatoes, how do you want How do you know?
Well, I see the story has
which
stayed
one-
with you. Go on.
How do you know which one is the prostitute? And I'd say, I don't know. How? He'd say, the one that has the label that says Idaho.
That's very good. I like that.
Every time.
Okay.
And I'd have to be surprised every time with the answer.
That was very nice of you.
And I got to tell you, I would laugh every freaking time. So anyway,
Did he pass?
you want to bring us on home?
Has he passed away?
Has he died?
Yes.
Yes, he's died.
Right. Not passed, but he died. Has he died? Yeah. Well, then I'm
He
sure.
died,
Then I'm sure
yes.
he died a happy man, knowing that you laughed at
He'd
his
probably
jokes.
love that I'm telling this joke to you.
Yeah.
He would probably think that was a riot. See, but we're talking about grief. We're saying, find something about that person and incorporate it.
Ah,
It's
yes.
like
right.
Every time I see potatoes, I tell my husband that joke. I mean, he has to listen to it constantly.
He's a patient man.
No.
So does he do the same thing?
In more ways than
always
one.
laugh. Always laugh at the story. He's a good man.
Well, it might be the Alzheimer's because he doesn't ever remember the answer.
Don't say that. Stop that. Don't say that.
Anyway.
And on that happy note, listen, everyone, thank you for listening. Please stay tuned for future episodes of Everyone Dies. Our thanks to our CEO, retired Major General David, our producer Sandy, John, our technical advisor, and our friends and family who are helping make this podcast a reality. This is Charlie Navarrete.
And I'm Marianne Matzo.
And we look forward to talking with you soon.
Goodbye.
Bye.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.